I would make the deposit £550, so it's actually a little bit more than 1 month's rent, and that the £50 then kind of helps to, one, it's a little bit more cash, and two, it helps to recompense you if there should be a problem at the end of the tenancy where you need to go for through a solicitor, so it's £50 towards those costs. Again, we've seldom had to keep deposits, but from time to time it does happen, sometimes by mutual agreement, other times we've had to go through the due process, but hopefully that's not something that would affect you. Lots of people take maybe 3 months rent as a deposit, but you need to be really careful if you're getting up over more than maybe 2 months. Typically people who are renting, especially in this sort of social demographic looking for a 2-bed terrace house, you might find that they struggle to find 2 months rent as a deposit and a month's rent as well up front. That may be quite a lot of cash for them. Also, as you push on beyond 2 months, potentially you're creating a different legal contract, and you might find if that deposit was contested, that they would argue that it actually wasn't a deposit, and you're just getting into dodgy territory, I think. So I would keep it south of 2 months rent. Let's say for me, a month plus £50 has always worked quite well for us. It comes on page 3 of the contract now. Page 3 of the contract, it's asking that if there's more than one tenant, who is to deal with the deposit. In this case, I would write Natalie, because I always find girls are just a bit more reliable, and tend to read the paperwork and whatnot which comes from the DPS, saving you just quite a lot of grief at the end when the guys inevitably lose their all the reference numbers and whatnot that they need in order to get the deposit back. If you charge an administration fee, that should be on a contract. Personally, I always charge an admin. Now, we do that as a business, obviously, but I'd say it's perfectly fine for you as the landlord to maybe put a figure in there, keep it reasonable. You might charge up to £120 perhaps, just for arranging the contract and for the hassle that goes with that. You know, this is your time that they're paying you for. You have had to join the RLA in order to purchase the contracts, so I think it's fair. You know, maybe you're running credit checks and things as well, which is something that you should have done by this stage if you're doing a contract. Run some background checks, and that just help cover the cost of those and the time. We then move on to section B, where it talks about the rent, and very importantly here, because lots of people are quite random in how they make payments. The contract specifically says you must pay the rent on the day and in the way we have agreed. So I always take electronic payments. I don't like cash. Cash is a problem. It means I have to walk around with that cash on me, maybe £500, maybe more. I have to go into the town centre, I have to park up, I have to walk to the bank, I have to pay it in. So for me, I always like the transaction nice and clean and electronic. There's also a very good audit trail there as well for if at any point anyone argues about how much rent is paid. At point 2 here, it says that you must pay a reasonable cost for sending you reminder letters. These will be, I would put at least £20 there, maybe 25. And again, keep it reasonable, but enough that it's going to sting a little bit if you charge or threaten to charge that fee. I would normally only charge that for people who are persistent offenders and who are repeatedly late with their rent and random with their rent. It causes us cash flow problems as a business. It's just a real nuisance. Also, people paying on different dates really can mess with your head a little bit when you're trying to figure out what time period they've paid for. So the threat of the £20 usually keeps people in check. Then, of course, there's a fee if for example, people pay by cheque, which is probably less so these days, but you're perfectly within your rights to charge for that. So again, I would make that a similar fee, and these are costs which I would point out to the tenant just to make sure that they do as you're asking. I won't read most of the contract out to you because it's up to you to read that if that's something you want to do. But I suppose, again, one that I always point out to them is that they have a duty to keep the inside of the property in at least as good a condition as when the tenancy started, apart from fair wear and tear. And also, at the end of the tenancy, they must leave all the furniture and fixtures in the rooms or places they were in at the beginning of the tenancy. That's well worth pointing out to them, save you a lot of hassle at the end. Also, people do strange things, like if you provide pictures and they don't like them, they just throw them away. So make sure, it's a cost there to you. Make sure people are aware that if at the end of the tenancy those things are gone, you will perhaps be invoicing them for those things. And then when we come to the last page here, it says if you need to serve notice, you must deliver it by hand or send in the post to the following address. Now, I always put my own address here. Now, obviously, I really type my own address. I don't put my own address here. But then I also add a bit to it where I say, or we will accept your notice via email to the following. Ooh. To the following address, and then I give them my email address. I think in this day and age, it's perfectly reasonable for people to serve notice via email. Most of us, as landlords, or certainly as businesses, are using the internet. But I would always ask that they do actually send you notice, and this again just covers your back to make sure that they're not going to accuse you of maybe wrongly evicting them or something like this. It's also good to archive those, so that going forward, if ever somebody was to accuse you of being a rogue landlord, say, you have a clear record of how you've done business over the years, and that would be looked favourably upon in the courts. And then at the end here, we have the opportunity to write our signature and their signature. I always get them to put the time and date that they sign this, okay? And the time is important. I'll tell you why when we come to the section 21 in a second. But get them to put the time and date, and also get them to go back and initial the bottom of each page. And I do that just so that you're proving that you did serve them every page of the contract. In the case of this contract from the Resident Landlords Association, it's something you print out on your own printer, so it's just a series of A4 sheets of paper stapled together. So just a little initial on the bottom of the page is good, just to confirm that you did serve them each page. Also, of course, you need 2 copies of the contract. I tend to take 2 copies pre-printed out and just get them to sign everything, and that way you can leave them with one contract for themselves, and you can take one away for yourself. I also take 2 copies of the section 21. Now, this is exactly the same as the other one. So what did we call them? I forget now. It was David Brown and Natalie Smith. So 2 Brown and Natalie Smith. As we said at the beginning, the Section 21 notice is effectively a no-blame termination of the contract. They need to be given 30 days notice, and it can only be served at the end of the fixed period of the tenancy. Though you could serve that for it to come into play on the day the fixed term of the tenancy ends. This is a great document for removing someone from the property who maybe they're chaotic rent payers, maybe you're not getting all your rent. It's cleaner than going down the route of the Section 8 notice, and less costly as well. With this, you're literally just asking them to leave the property, and it's all legitimate. Fingers crossed they do walk out. They can't contest this in court, unlike other eviction notices such as the Section 8. So the only downside of the Section 21 is you can't serve it for the initial fixed period of the tenancy. But it's a fairly speedy way of getting your property back. We said they lived at 29 Acacia Road, Warrington, and it was WA27ZZ, I think. You need to insert your name again, your home address, and then their address where they're living again. You're telling them that after this date, so I've just put the earliest possible date in, so after the 7th of November, 7th of November 2015, you want the property back. You want the property back, and that would be dated with today's date, 9th of May 2015, and you would sign it. Now, the reason I issue this at the beginning of the tenancy, some people say not to do that because they say it gets the tenancy off on the bad foot. You're effectively giving someone an eviction notice on the day they're moving in. Well, what I would say to counter that is most people who I've met haven't really been aware that it was effectively an eviction notice when they were signing it, even though I may, in a friendly way, explain that to them. They've also got a lot going on. Don't forget, they're moving house, they're moving home, so they're not really thinking. They just want the paper signed and they want the job done. By getting them to initial the bottom here and getting them to put the date and the time on, what you're doing is confirming you have definite proof that you issued the Section 21 notice. If you were to not do this at this moment, it's still possible to issue it at a later date. The only problem is then you need proof that it was delivered and it was received by them, and it's just a bit more of a delay. If you're posting it, you need to allow time for the post to arrive and things like this. The key issue there, you would perhaps still, if you decided to evict them, still post a copy of this out with a letter telling them that you wanted them to leave the property. But the main point is that they were served it already, and they can't deny that they were served this document. The reason we get them to write the time on the bottom is that in order to issue a Section 21, you have to have a valid contract. So they're writing a different time on the bottom of the Section 21 than they wrote on the bottom of the contract. Even if it's just a minute or two later, the contract there's already a valid contract in place, meaning you're within your rights to serve the Section 21. So that's why we put the time on both of those pages. I hope that's been of use to you. That's Foxdog Properties talking about setting up an AST and issuing a Section 21 document. I hope you have good luck with it, and I hope you have as many good years as we've had in managing property with as few troublesome tenants as we've had. Enjoy the rest of your day.